Well, this morning is going to be a little bit of a different Sunday. Today is Sanctity of Life Sunday, Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. And so we're going to be learning a bit more about that. And we're going to be having two speakers with us this morning. The first one from Grace Church and the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic, Becky Strom, will give a presentation. And then we have Alan Shlemon here coming from Stand to Reason. And so we're looking forward to that as well. Becky, why don't you come on up? I gave you the false go ahead. Why don't you come on up and share with us?
Thank you, Nate. Good morning, Grace family. In Job 17, 3-4, we find Job having a dialogue with God. Starting with verse 3, he says, "You must defend my innocence, O God, for no one else will stand up for me. You close their minds to understanding, but you do not let them triumph." At the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic, it is our mission to defend the unborn, to open the minds of expectant mothers through counseling and the wonder of ultrasound images, their gasps and the tears that we get to witness when an unexpected pregnancy happens. She's scared, undecided, and she sees her baby's heartbeat for the first time in the ultrasound monitor is nothing short of God's grace. Mothers like Jessica.
My name is Jessica, and when I first found out I was pregnant, I was 17 years old, and I was still trying to graduate high school and get my driver's license and figure all of that out. And my boyfriend had actually just lost his job, so it was already a pretty stressful time. And then I started feeling super sick, and I thought maybe it was like the pressure from finals or like just maybe I was getting sick, right? But something told me I needed to go take a pregnancy test. So when I went and did that, it came back positive, and it was from the dollar store, so I didn't exactly trust it. But I seen the sign outside the pregnancy clinic that said free pregnancy test, and I thought that would probably be the best option to see if it was for sure. And we were like super nervous going in, but everyone was super friendly. All of the staff was very helpful, and we filled out our paperwork and took the test. And it came back positive too. So I called Adam in to tell him the news. And we were both totally terrified, absolutely terrified. They did a really good job at giving us a lot of information and telling us what to expect from then on. And that was awesome. We had no idea. We had never been around babies at all. So figuring that out was really helpful. After telling some of my family members, some of them even encouraged abortion. And that made me feel really uneasy and upset because I've previously experienced that and it wasn't something I wanted to go through again. After taking the test initially, we started going to pregnancy and parenting classes, and the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic offered all kinds of information and baby supplies and the motivation and encouragement that we needed to do it. With Adam not having a job, he ended up coming to every single class and meeting with me. And that was super helpful because then he knew what to expect as well. And we went multiple times a week until he started his job. The classes were super helpful, and we had no clue what we were in for because we had never had experience with babies. We also participated in the car seat program and the Bridges meetings. And I really appreciated being able to connect with other moms and shop for baby supplies because we couldn't actually afford those things from like Walmart or Target. So it was awesome being able to go and like nest and buy things that I needed for the baby and get excited about it. I really enjoy going to these meetings, and I still do. And being young and having not so much support from my family members can be super rough when going through something like an unplanned pregnancy. But the pregnancy clinic was always there to help, and they gave us the courage we needed to be young parents. When no one else offered support and help, they were there. Currently, I have graduated high school last year during my pregnancy, and I'm currently attending college for graphic design. I'm working towards my bachelor's degree, and I tested out of my freshman year and only have 2 years left. Me and my then boyfriend got married and are having our second baby and still utilizing all of the services that the clinic has to offer. Our daughter Hunter is thriving, and she's currently trying to walk and cruising across all the furniture. She knows hi and bye, and she waves when we say them to her. She's learning super fast, and I can't believe she's grown so much. We love her more than anything in the world. She's made our lives super incredible in every single way, and both of us really enjoy watching her grow and learn. We're in a much better place now, and I don't know if we could have done that without the help from the clinic. I definitely recommend them to anyone going through a rough situation like we did.
This week marks the 48th anniversary since the Roe v. Wade decision, and since we have lost millions of babies to abortion in that time. Statistics show actually, that our efforts are working to save the unborn. The highest recorded year was 1990, in which 1.9 million babies were aborted in the United States. Our efforts are working, and reporting is slow. In 2018, the CDC reported a 67% decrease in abortions, and that's approximately 619,000 babies aborted in the U.S. that year. I think you and I can agree that that number is way too high, and we will not stop until abortion is eradicated. Join us to be on the front lines for the unborn. These are not possible babies. These are babies with great possibilities. These are our next doctors and pastors, our next clinic directors and advocates, our next teachers and welders. These babies are our future. Now you may ask, how can I defend them? You can be on our team. We currently have a need for nurses and for advocates. You can pray for us. Our clinic, our volunteers, our upcoming Walk for Life, and our marketing director, Gail. Pray for her. Pray for encouragement for her to reach more undecided women and girls. Lastly, I'm not up here to pass an offering basket this morning. I'm up here to invite you to our drive-up baby shower. It's going to be this coming Saturday, January 23rd, from 9 to 10:30 a.m. at the clinic. We'll also be on Facebook Live, having fun and playing games, because that's what you do at a baby shower, right? If you're not able to drive by at that time but still want to donate a gift, you may do so. You were given this insert this morning, and all the details that you need are on the insert. I would sincerely like to thank you for supporting the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic's efforts to defend the unborn who are not babies with possibilities. I did it again, didn't I? I did that last year too. Sorry, the nerves. These are not possible babies. These are babies with great possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you to the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic, how much we appreciate you guys and appreciate the many hours that you put in, both volunteer and those who are on staff. And we love you, and we just do thank you for all that you do for the unborn. Well, today we have a special guest with us. Alan Shlemon is coming from Stand to Reason. He's a speaker who spoke around the country many different times over many different topics. But this morning, he's going to be speaking to us about making abortion unthinkable, since it is Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. And so, Alan, why don't you come on up?
Thank you. Well, good morning. I'm excited to be here for Sanctity of Human Life Sunday because it's my 23rd anniversary, wedding anniversary. So I'm not sure how the two are related, but it just seems to be pretty cool for me to be able to celebrate with you guys that in a sense. Not that we're going to be talking about my anniversary, but nevertheless, very cool. Hey, you have handout notes in your bulletin if you want to follow along in the outline. As you see, we'll be talking about making abortion unthinkable. You know, there is a lot of talk about social justice in our culture today. Even amongst Christians, you probably hear the term social justice mentioned. And typically, when this term is used, many people have in their mind things like homelessness, poverty, racial injustice, human trafficking, and many other social ills like that. Now, I'm not trying to diminish the significance of any of those. Those are things absolutely that we as Christians should care about, right? But curiously absent from the social justice issue list is the topic of abortion. But if what we believe about abortion is true, that abortion kills an innocent human being, then abortion should rise to the top of the social justice issue list. Why? Because abortion is still legal in all 50 states throughout all 9 months of pregnancy and for virtually any reason. And according to Planned Parenthood's own data, and they are the number one abortion provider in America today, according to Planned Parenthood's own data, 2,363 unborn children are killed each day in America alone. That's nearly the number of people that died in the September 11th terrorist attacks. And that happens every single day. Now, that alone is upsetting, but here's what really makes my blood boil. According to that same data, 27% of people who are having these abortions identify themselves as Catholic. 38% of them identify themselves as Protestant. That means Christians are killing their own children. The most dangerous place for a baby to be in America today is simply resting in her own mother's womb. And so that's why I want to talk to you this morning about how we can make that place safer for unborn children by making abortion unthinkable. Now, there's probably a lot of practical things that I'm sure you could think about that you can do to help, depending on your time, depending on your skills, depending on kind of the resources you have. For example, you can vote for pro-life candidates, right? You can vote for pro-life policies, right, if you're old enough to vote. You can donate your money to pro-life individuals or pro-life organizations that are doing the work of trying to protect the unborn. You can volunteer your time or give your money to pregnancy resource centers like the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic that we just heard about, right? These are organizations that are on the front lines serving women, many women who are facing crisis pregnancies, and oftentimes they can be abortion-minded women. But because of pregnancy resource centers, they are able to have their needs met, have their crisis alleviated, and many times they change their minds about abortion because places like Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic are providing women with food, money, supplies, sometimes lodging, health care. It's amazing. So as you can see, there's a lot of practical things you can do. Now, one of the things I want to teach you this morning, however, is something that I believe anyone can do as well, and that is to change minds on abortion. Now, some of you might be thinking to yourselves, well, Alan, that's really noble of you. You want to save babies. That's great. And you want to try to help encourage people change minds on abortion. But the reality is, Alan, no one ever changes their mind on abortion. Abortion is far too emotional of a subject, and people are entrenched on one side or the other, and no one ever changes their mind. I get told that all the time. I completely disagree with that assessment. In fact, I know it's not true because I've been involved personally engaging people on the subject of abortion and seeing people change their minds. And I routinely train students at the high school, college, and even adults to learn the art of pro-life persuasion. And then I take these students out into downtown areas like Portland, Los Angeles, Atlanta. And then we use our skills of pro-life persuasion to engage people on the streets. And even then we see people sometimes change their minds. So I know it can be done. The key is you have to use the right approach. And this morning I want to talk about that right approach by answering 3 key questions that will help you to make abortion unthinkable. Right? So here's the first question that I want to answer. What is the unborn? This is the first key question that I want to answer. What is the unborn? Now, people think abortion is a complex issue, and I'm sure many of you agree, right? And no doubt about it, it is and can be very, very complex because there's things like understanding choice and privacy and rape and incest and the financial hardship that many women face, unwantedness, and a whole host of other factors. And no question, it can be psychologically and emotionally complex for a woman who is facing a crisis pregnancy, no doubt. But morally speaking, abortion is rather simple. In fact, I don't think you even have to have a knowledge of all of those different subjects in order to be able to speak intelligently about the art of pro-life persuasion. You just have to answer one key question. And that one key question is, what is the unborn? Let me give you an illustration as to how I know this is the key question, okay? Imagine for a moment you're at your kitchen sink and you're doing the dishes, okay? So it's some evening, you're doing the dishes, and imagine you have, just for the sake of an example here, a 6-year-old son, right? So you're doing the dishes and you hear your 6-year-old son come up behind you, and while your back is turned to him, you hear your 6-year-old son say, "Mommy or Daddy, can I kill this?" Now, before you can answer his question, what question are you going to ask him? Yeah, what is it, right? So you stop washing the dishes, you turn around, and you notice your 6-year-old son is holding a daddy long-legged spider in his hand. Okay, now what's your answer going to be to him? Sure, go ahead, son. You take one leg, I'll take another leg. Let's pull that sucker in two, okay? All right, what if he's holding the neighbor's cat? What's your answer going to be? Okay, all right, well, I guess we have some dog lovers here. All right, let me make it a little bit more obvious. What if he's holding his little sister by the neck? What's your answer going to be? Okay, it's like, okay, little Johnny needs counseling, right? I mean, let's go to a therapist ASAP, right? But I want you to notice what this illustration shows us. Whether or not it's moral to kill something depends entirely upon what it is we're killing. Notice, you can't answer the question, can I kill this, until you first answer the question, what is it? Right? So here's the key point that I want you to commit to memory. It's on your notes, but I want you to commit to memory. And when you ask the question, what is the unborn? If it turns out that the unborn is not a human being, then no justification for abortion is necessary. If, however, it turns out that the unborn is a human being, just like you and me, then no justification for abortion is adequate. Right? Think about it for a moment. If the unborn's not a human being, go ahead, have the abortion. What's the big deal? If abortion is no different than having your tooth pulled or your tonsils taken out or your appendix removed, then go ahead, have the abortion. It doesn't matter. It's not a human being. But if it turns out that the unborn is a human being, just like you and me, and from the moment of conception that's true, then there's no justification for killing an innocent human being like you and me. And this is why I'm saying the key question is, what is the unborn? Now, let's go ahead then and answer this question by appealing to what I call the science of embryology. I mean, we could perhaps look at the biblical reasons why God says that unborn human beings are valuable, and certainly we can kind of address that in a moment. But you have to probably realize that for a lot of people, they don't consider the Bible to be an authority. And so we can actually turn to what's known as the science of embryology. And what's amazing about this is that the science of embryology is decisive on the question as to what is the unborn. In fact, I'm going to show you 3 lines of evidence here. One, I'm going to show you that the science of embryology proves that the unborn is a living being. Number 2, I'll show that the science of embryology proves that the unborn is a distinct being, meaning not merely part of the mother's body. And the third thing I'll show you is that the science of embryology proves that the unborn is a human type of being. Not a potential human, or not some other type of being like a dog being or a petunia being or a rose being, right? But a human type of being. And so if we can show each of these 3 things is true simply from the science of embryology, I believe we will have made the case that the unborn is a human being. So let's take each one of these in turn. Let's start with the first one, which is perhaps the least controversial. Is the unborn alive? Well, the answer in this case is really obviously a yes. And even according to scientists and biologists, they have what's called the biological criteria for life. When they're looking at something and trying to wonder, is this thing alive? They ask 3 questions. Does it grow? Does it respond to stimuli? And does this thing metabolize nutrients? Meaning, does it take in nutrition and convert it to energy? If what they're looking at does those 3 things, the scientists or biologists would say, aha, yes, this thing is alive. Turns out the unborn grows, responds to stimuli, and metabolizes nutrients, takes in nutrition and converts it to energy. So we can conclude then that the unborn is a living thing. Again, not super controversial or amazing, but still a necessary starting point. Okay? Now, is this living thing a part of the mother's body, like her liver or her heart or her brain, or is it a unique individual being? Well, again, from the science of embryology, there are several characteristics about the unborn that are different than that of the mother that gives us reason to conclude that the unborn is a unique individual being. For example, the unborn has its own fingerprints that are different than the fingerprints of the mother. Now, that alone seems to be decisive evidence, right? I mean, in a court of law, we can use fingerprints to distinguish one person from another person and convict a person of a crime, for example, based on fingerprints. Also, the unborn's DNA, or their genetic fingerprint, is also different than that of the mother's, right? And again, when it comes to a court of law, DNA evidence is decisive in delineating one person from another. And it turns out that the unborn's DNA is different than that of the mother's. The mother's heart and lung and bones and muscles all have her same DNA, but the unborn's DNA, totally different. Why? Because it's a unique individual being. The unborn also has its own brain and central nervous system, its own brainwave pattern that is different than the mother. The unborn could be a boy, which obviously the mother is not. The unborn has its own heart and blood type that's different than the mother, or can be different than the mother. And the unborn even has its own circulatory system. Now, here's something that's rather fascinating when it comes to the blood system. The unborn's blood and the mother's blood comes very, very close together inside what's called the placenta. Okay? But the blood of the mother and the blood of the unborn do not connect. It's not like her blood is running into the veins and the arteries of the unborn. They come close together, but they don't mix. Now, here's something that's rather fascinating. If there was some problem inside the placenta where the blood of the mother and the blood of the unborn come close together, if there was a developmental problem and the blood lines were to mix, here's what would happen. The mother's body would mount an immune response, an immune attack against the unborn's body. Why? Because the mother's body perceives the unborn's body as a foreign body, not part of her body, a foreign entity. Notice, the mother's immune system does not attack her brain or her eyes or her bone or her liver because her immune system knows that's part of her body. But if the immune system was to detect the unborn's body through the bloodstream, it would immediately send an immune attack response against it. Which again is further evidence that what the unborn is a unique individual being, not part of the mother's body. So notice then, we've concluded 2 points then. The unborn's alive, and now we know the unborn is a unique individual being. Now the question becomes, well, what kind of being is it? Is it an elephant being? Is it a dog being? Is it a human being? Is it a dolphin being? Is it a rose being or a marigold being or a petunia or an arachnid? What kind of being is it? Now there's 2 ways that we can answer this question. The first is, if we had, for example, the capacity to go inside the mother and take a tissue sample of the unborn and test the DNA of the unborn for determining what kind of being it is, it would come out to say it is a human being. Now, although that would be definitive every single time we ran that test, most of us probably don't have access to such a test, right? You can't go down to Vaughn's and get, 2-for-1 coupon for some sort of DNA test like that, right? So how else then could we show someone we're talking to that the unborn is a human type of being? Well, thankfully, back in the 19th century, Louis Pasteur developed what's called the principle of biogenesis. Now, that's just a fancy term for a concept every one of us knows. And the concept is this: living things reproduce after their own kind. Meaning, when two dogs come together and mate, they're going to produce another what? Dog. That's right. When two giraffes come together and mate, they're going to produce another what? Giraffe. That's right. When my wife was pregnant, we wondered, are we going to have a boy or a girl? But notice we didn't wonder, are we going to have a human or not? Like, that wasn't a question. When we had our second child, and she also turned out to be a human, we weren't surprised by that. Like, wow, 2 humans in a row. What are the chances? Like, mind blown. Right? Because we know how this works. So this principle provides for us a very practical test. If you want to know what kind of being the unborn is, all you got to do is ask a very simple question. What are its parents? And if the parents are human, then the unborn or its offspring will also be human. Every single time. It is a scientific impossibility for 2 humans to come together and mate to produce something that is not human, but then later becomes one at some other time. Just scientifically impossible. Okay. So notice then, we've provided scientific evidence from the field of embryology that the unborn is a living being, that the unborn is a distinct, unique individual being, and that the unborn is a human kind of being. And this is why we can conclude scientifically that the unborn is, from the moment of conception, a human being just like you and me. Because all these 3 things are true from the moment of conception. Now, I want to show you a video that will now allow you to confirm with your eyes what your mind has just learned, and that is that the unborn is a human being. Now, this is it's not a graphic video. It's a normal video. It shows what's called an embryoscopy. Now, embryoscopies are a little bit different than ultrasounds. You've probably all seen an ultrasound. Ultrasounds kind of are this little black and white, sort of scratchy, grainy, image. You can see the baby, like, oh yeah, there's a baby in there. That's true. That's wonderful. And these are powerful. This is why pregnancy resource centers try to invest in ultrasound machines, because for an abortion-minded woman to see an ultrasound, a visual depiction of her own child, is incredibly powerful. And sometimes that alone changes the mind of women who might be abortion-minded. And that's why many pregnancy resource centers invest in these kinds of technologies. But an embryoscopy is different. This is where you take an actual camera, a little teeny camera, with a little teeny flashlight, and you get it inside the mother and inside the amniotic sac to see the little unborn human being inside. And so this is a video of such a device. This is what an unborn human being looks like at just 9 weeks development. I mean, it's remarkable. At just a couple months of pregnancy, that's what a human being looks like inside, right? And there's no denying that we see that and we think, man, there's an immediate kinship between who we are and what we're seeing in there, right? And this is why I say images are so powerful in helping to change minds about abortion. And so I hope you can see then that we've answered the first question. What is the unborn? Scientifically, we know it's a human being, and even visually when we look at it, we think, man, yeah, we're talking about a human being here. But now I want to answer a second question, and that is, what makes human beings valuable? Okay, we know scientifically it's a human being, but is it a valuable human being or a non-valuable human being? Now, biblically speaking, this question is obviously answered by just simply looking at what Scripture says about the nature of humanity, right? Human beings are valuable because we are made in the image of God. This is what it says in Genesis 1:27. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And so what it means to be made in God's image means that we have what's called intrinsic value. Intrinsic value is just a fancy term for this idea that our value is inherent within us in virtue of having God's image-bearing stamp on our soul. Now, although followers of Jesus Christ would, of course, accept this as truth, many people, of course, don't consider the Bible to be an authority, right? As we mentioned before. And so sometimes you have to be able to make your case without appealing to the Word of God. Now, again, scientifically, I've already shown that the unborn is a human being, but now I want to show you how we would make the case that all human beings are valuable, and you can't disqualify the unborn just because they're not born yet, all right? Many years ago, I debated a feminist. She's a women's studies professor at Cal State University in San Marcos. And we had a formal debate on campus where we debated the topic of abortion. And in the debate, I presented the scientific evidence for the full humanity of the unborn from the moment of conception. And during the debate, Dr. Chadwick, she actually responded by saying, you know what? I actually agree with Alan's evidence. I believe that the unborn is a human being, but she still said it's permissible to have an abortion. And I want you to see how she made that case. In fact, this is the standard approach that most academics take. They say this: well, yes, the unborn is a human being from conception, but it's not a human person. That's different. You can abort a human being, but you can't abort a human person. Now, what question pops into your mind when you hear that? Yeah. What's the difference? What's the difference between a human being and a human person? Now, consider this. They must have an answer to this question. Because think about what they've just claimed. They've just claimed there is a group of human beings that we can kill with impunity simply because they're not persons. Really? Well, who are those human beings that we can kill because they're not persons, you know? Maybe that's a new sport we could take up, like chase down the humans that aren't persons or what. This is crazy, right? Now, what she did and what standard academics will do is they'll say, well, they'll offer a bunch of characteristics and qualities they believe distinguish a human being from a human person. You know, human persons are aware of their own existence, are able to think in moral categories, have hopes and dreams, are independent, and they'll just give you this list of things that the unborn human beings are not, and therefore we can disqualify the unborn human beings while saying these human beings that are persons have these characteristics. Okay? Now, all of those characteristics that they might suggest are the relevant factor. All of them can be put into one of four categories. And here are those four categories: size, or physical appearance, level of development, environment, or degree of dependency. In other words, what I want to acknowledge is that, yes, it's true that an unborn human being is different than a born human person, right, in these four ways. But as I'm about to show you, none of these four ways are relevant. None of these four ways that an unborn is different than a born person justify disqualifying the unborn while protecting a born person. Okay? And you can remember them with the acronym SLED. In fact, we call this the SLED test. Okay? Again, this is going to be a summary of four ways in which a born human being is different than a born human being is different than an unborn human being. But as I'm about to show you, none of them are relevant to the question of value. All right? So let's take a look at the first one, size. Okay? Yes, it's true. The unborn is smaller than a born human being. But why does size have anything to do with your value, right? I mean, men are generally larger than women. Does that mean men are more valuable than women? Guys, be quiet, by the way, here. This is where you zip it, okay? There's always some guys like, yeah, that's a good point. I'm like, no, sir, you're not helping. Like, no, of course not, right? Size is irrelevant. When it comes to the Guinness Book of World Records many years ago, invited the tallest person on earth and the shortest person on earth to come together. I think it was in London, actually. Sultan Kozan, who's a Turkish man, 8 feet 3 inches. Little Chandra, 1 foot 9.5 inches. I mean, you could like punt the guy. I mean, not that you would, because that'd be dehumanizing. But I mean, he's that small. Now, is the fact that Sultan's larger than Chandra mean that he's more valuable than Chandra or more of a person than Chandra? No, because size is irrelevant when it comes to human value. In the same way, the unborn just happens to be smaller than Chandra. And by the way, not by very much. Right? And so we wouldn't disqualify the unborn because they're smaller for the same reason we wouldn't disqualify Chandra because he's smaller. Because the size of your body is irrelevant to your status as a person or whether you're valuable or not. So that's the S in SLED. All right, let's go to the L in SLED. That stands for level of development. Yes, it's true. The unborn is less developed than a born human being. No question about that. But why is how developed you are somehow qualify you to become a valuable person? Or why is being less developed somehow disqualify you from being a valuable person? But that's a picture of my son when he was just a month old. Oh, he's so cute and quiet. Now he's 15 and he just says a lot more things, but not always pleasant things. But enough about my problems. Okay, so there's no question that the unborn is less developed than a born human being. But think about it. A 4-year-old girl is less developed than a 14-year-old girl. Right? A 4-year-old girl's reproductive system hasn't even fully developed, whereas a 14-year-old girl's reproductive system has, and she can get pregnant and carry a child. Does that mean that the 4-year-old girl is less of a person or less valuable simply because she can't get pregnant? Well, of course not. That's ridiculous. Of course it's ridiculous. And so the unborn just happens to be less developed than a 4-year-old girl. And so we can't disqualify the unborn simply because they're less developed, for the same reason we wouldn't disqualify a 4-year-old girl because she's less developed. Because how developed you are is irrelevant to the question of value. What about the E in SLED? It stands for environment. Yes, it's true. The unborn is in a different location, a different environment than a born human being. But clearly where you are has no bearing on who you are, right? When people travel out into space in a spacesuit, or they swim underwater with scuba gear, are they somehow less valuable or less of a person simply because they've changed location? By the way, in both of those instances, those people are not viable in that environment without assistance, are they? Yet we don't disqualify them from being persons, because where you are or whether you change your environment does not disqualify or change your status as a person. In the same way, the unborn just happened to be in a different environment. So how could a 7-inch journey down the birth canal somehow magically transform a non-valuable human being into a valuable person? That makes no sense. Nothing has changed except location. If a person is valuable in one location, that same exact person should be still valuable in another location, just inches away. And then D in the SLED test stands for degree of dependency. Yes, absolutely, the unborn is more dependent upon their mother for survival than many of us who are born, right? But again, why is being dependent upon someone else all of a sudden disqualify you from being valuable? There are many people in hospitals today, or even elderly people, who are dependent upon doctors or heart and lung machines, or dependent upon their adult children to care for them. Does that mean we disqualify them from being valuable? Of course not. You've probably heard of people who are conjoined twins. They're born as twins, but their bodies are literally conjoined, and they're sharing sometimes multiple organs. They are dependent upon each other. They share organs. Does that mean we can disqualify conjoined twins from being viable simply because they depend upon each other for their survival? No, of course not. Or just imagine one day you're all by yourself and see a 1-year-old kid fall in the deep end of a swimming pool. Their life is now entirely dependent upon you for their survival. Could you say, well, guess what? I got bad news for you. Because you depend upon me for your survival, you don't qualify as a person. You're not a valuable human being. So see ya, I'm going to go have some pepperoni pizza. It's like, that's ridiculous, right? Because being dependent upon someone else doesn't disqualify you from being valuable, right? In fact, babies of all ages are dependent upon their mothers for feeding, whether via blood, breast, or bottle, right? And I can assure you, after my 2 children were born, they were still dependent upon their mothers and me for their survival, right? I'm sure some of you mothers have teenagers that are still dependent upon you for their survival, right? Some of you women probably have husbands who are dependent upon your survival. No, just kidding. Shouldn't go there, okay? So notice then, there's only 4 kinds of differences between an unborn human being and a born human being, right? Size, level of development, environment, degree, dependency. And notice, none of them are legitimate. None of them justify killing one and not the other. None of these characteristics says, oh yes, this makes someone a valuable person, and this one does not. Because notice, born people have these same differences, those SLED differences, and we don't disqualify them. What makes human beings valuable is not some quality or characteristics that we arbitrarily impose, right? Like the SLED characteristics. It's the fact that we're all made in God's image, right? It's not something we acquire. We're born with it. We can't lose it. So we've answered then the second question, what makes human beings valuable? I want to conclude by asking and answering a third question, and that is, well, what is our duty? You know, Jesus told us to love our neighbor, right? Perhaps one of the most famous commands he gave. Well, is the unborn our neighbor? Well, he is if he's a human being. And what have we shown today? He is a human being. Therefore, the unborn is our neighbor. So then what does it mean to love our neighbor? Well, love, biblically understood, is more than a feeling, right? It's not just a feeling. It's an action. It's something that we do, right? And Jesus said, if you love me, you will obey me. And he taught what's known as the parable of the Good Samaritan. This is where he explains how you have this priest and a Levite walk past this man who's been beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. And Jesus castigates the priest and the Levite not because they didn't feel compassion, not because they didn't feel pity, but because they did nothing to show compassion, right? The Samaritan, on the other hand, feels pity and compassion, but then he does something. He puts his compassion into behavior, and he takes steps to care for the man who's left for dead. And Jesus says, go and do the same. My point here is that we can't be just pro-life in our attitude. Yes, I'm pro-life. I think babies are valuable. Okay, great. It's great that you have that attitude. Now I want you to turn that attitude into a behavior and do something to stop the killing. And so we have a chance then to be champions for life. And champions go beyond what merely feels good. They do what the rest won't do, and that is they go above and beyond. And I'm thinking of champions like Oskar Schindler. Many of you have probably heard of Oskar Schindler. Maybe you've even seen the movie. If not, I strongly encourage you to watch this movie. But Oskar Schindler was a man during the Jewish Holocaust who used his money and his businesses to buy Jews off the death camp list and employ them in his factory. And by doing that, Oskar Schindler saved thousands of Jews. There's a remarkable scene at the end of Schindler's List. It's a great movie. And Oskar Schindler is standing there. There's 1,100 Jews all around him that he has literally saved. And they are there to thank him as he has to say goodbye because now his life is in jeopardy. He's on the run. He has to get in his car and take off. And as Oskar Schindler's there just kind of taking in the magnitude of what's happened, he looks at one of them and he says, I didn't do enough. And they're all like, Oskar, you did everything you can. Look at all these people, 1,100 people. You did plenty. And Oscar's like, no, I didn't do enough. And he turns and sees his car and he says, my gosh, my car. He goes, I could have sold this car and taken the money and bought 10 more people. I could have saved 10 more lives. I didn't do enough. I should have done more. I'm like, no, Oscar, you've done enough. Then he pulls a pin off his coat. He says, this pin, it's made of gold. I could have sold this pin and used the money to save 2 more people. No, maybe 1 more person. I don't know. I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough. And he falls down on his knees, weeping, crying, and saying, I didn't do enough. I could have saved more, but I didn't do enough. Brothers and sisters, are we taking our Holocaust as seriously as Oskar Schindler took his? Are we loving our unborn neighbor the way Jesus commanded us to? Because remember, you were once an unborn human being. And killing you in the womb would have not have killed a potential you or someone like you. It would have killed you. So please join me. Please join the Good Samaritan. Please join Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic by becoming pro-life, not just in your attitude, but also in your behavior. Because it could be the difference between life and death for a fellow unborn human being. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, even though we gather here together as a sober reminder of the tragic Roe v. Wade decision 48 years ago that's killed millions of unborn human beings, Lord. Unborn human beings made in your image. We are thankful that we can gather to talk about this super important issue, this issue that is the ultimate social justice issue. Thank you for making it so evident of the value of life and that you've put your image-bearing stamp on our souls to give us value that can never be taken away. And now that we've been empowered with knowledge, Lord, we pray that we would use it boldly for the sake of saving unborn human children, Lord. Children that are being targeted for extinction. And we thank you for organizations like the Ramona Pregnancy Care Clinic, Lord, who are on the front lines, serving the needs of women and caring for them, Lord. Please bless their ministry, bless us, and give us the courage to do what we can to save human life so that we can bring honor and glory to your name. Amen.